From the day she was born, Lisa Marie Caputo was not the kind of person who did anything halfway. She was the type of person in constant competition with herself, taking every task as a challenge and working excessively hard to accomplish her goals. It wasn't enough that she did a good job. She had to do the best job, and everyone had to know it. And when she witnessed the Apollo 11 moon mission when she was just 6 years old, she made it her lifelong goal to become an astronaut. Something about space fascinated her. It seemed so ominous and foreboding, and it appeared to be the most exclusive club a person could get into. Only a handful of people had ever gone, and she was determined to be one of them. Every opportunity she could, she would visit the National Air and Space Museum, memorizing the exhibits and information therein. If she was going to have any chance of going to space, she would need to be the best, and that meant absorbing every piece of information that was available to her. By the time Lisa graduated high school, she was at the top of her class. She was co-valedictorian, getting perfect marks in all of her courses. She had also won Athlete of the Year for her participating in track and field and hockey. Not only that, but she had served on student council, was an active member of Girl Scouts, and had led her school's math team to victory countless times. All in service, she told her parents, of going to space. After graduating from high school, Lisa would make the decision to go to the United States Naval Academy over going to an Ivy League school. Her parents had hoped, foolishly, that she would choose the Ivy League, but she was dead set on the Navy, citing the collaboration between NASA and the Navy when sharing personnel. Despite Lisa's brilliance and physical strength, things were not smooth sailing with the Naval Academy. At the time, women had only been admitted to the academy for 6 years, and made up only 6% of each class. When she was admitted in 1981, many of her classmates, and even one of her professors, openly discussed how they felt that women didn't belong there. Many of her classmates, which were 96% male, would harass her, with her stating after the fact that she'd been physically assaulted multiple times. She, however, didn't report these instances of assault, and she knew that reporting what had happened would be used to penalize her and seen as women not being able to take a joke. For the most part, Lisa kept her head down and worked as hard as she had previously to achieve her goal. She continued to compete on the track team, and 4 years later, she would go into the Navy with a Bachelor of Science degree in aeronautical engineering. In 1985, Lisa traveled to the National Air Station Pensacola for flight training. She had worked tirelessly to be chosen for flight training, and, as by law, women were still banned from combat assignments. The women who were chosen for flight training had to be the best of the best, so much so that training them wasn't viewed as a waste. However, whenever a woman was allowed in the program, they would be harassed by the male candidates who happened to be passed over. But for Lisa, it was all worth it. In 1988, Lisa would marry fellow Annapolis classmate Richard T. Nowak. Richard had the same goals as Lisa and dreamed of making it to NASA, and though she served to motivate him, she would say in her interviews with NASA that her only motivation in life was her own goals. She was incredibly single-minded, and no person could discourage her. She would continue to hit every goal she had set out for herself, only to, in 1995, reach her ultimate goal of becoming an astronaut. This has been everything she dreamed of, and when she would go on to be interviewed by NASA about achieving her goal, she stated that she had forfeited everything in her life for the opportunity. Something about space called to her, she said, and she would stop at nothing to get there. About 8 years later, she would get there. But unfortunately, Lisa Nowak isn't known for her outstanding achievements in her illustrious career. Instead, she is known for being the first astronaut to be fired for attempting to kidnap and destroy her ex-lover's new girlfriend, and failing in spectacular fashion. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be exploring the case of Lisa Nowak. This case is so ridiculous that you've no doubt heard of it, even if just passing. Jokes about this case have been featured on Family Guy, even late-night talk shows, and multiple feature films. But very few people know what actually happened in this case, which is why, when it was requested by one of our patrons over on Patreon, we made the choice to thoroughly research the video. Before researching for this very video, I will admit there were details in this case that I believed to be true that were actually complete fiction, so I hope to clear those issues up with you today. With that in mind, if there is a case you would like to see us tackle on this channel, let me know by either leaving a comment down below or emailing me at dreading.official@gmail.com. Lately, YouTube has been limiting, if not entirely shutting off my comment sections, as they seem to be testing out restrictions for true crime channels. So if the comment section is removed, email me at your convenience. If you're interested in helping support the channel, please consider checking us out via Patreon, which will be linked below. With all of that said, let us begin.
Nowak drove from Houston to Orlando wearing diapers.
She was wearing diapers. Did she say why?
She wore the diapers so that she wouldn't have to pull over during her 950-mile journey.
Diapers.
Diapers.
The diapers.
She wore a kind of diaper.
And in a bizarre display of NASA ingenuity, diapers.
Preparing for space flight is neither as fun or glamorous as billionaires like Jeff Bezos will make it appear, with astronauts having to push their bodies to the limits to make sure they are ready for the endeavor. One of the ways they do this is through survival missions, which tested a group's ability to survive even in the most dire of circumstances. In January of 2004, Lisa would participate in one of these missions, alongside fellow astronauts Dominic Antonelli, William Oefelein, Christer Fuglesang, Dmitry Kondrachev, and Julie Payet. The test was simple. They were to be dropped off in the wilderness of Quebec with very little food and equipment. Over the next weeks, they would have to work together to get food and shelter, all the while fighting the intense cold. Luckily for Lisa, she knew at least some of the people on her team. William was someone she had known since 1995. Despite being married, Lisa had always carried somewhat of a torch for William, as the two had a lot in common. Like Lisa, William was incredibly driven when it came to his career. He was married with 2 wonderful children with his high school sweetheart and wife, Michaela. His career had led him to be one of the best NASA had to offer, and it appeared that everyone who knew him adored him. And now that the two were trapped together in the wilderness of Quebec, there was nothing stopping them from getting as close as they wanted to, besides the other people there. Lisa and William bonded heavily on this trip, though they were careful not to take things too far. However, immediately after the survival training mission was deemed a success, the two began to start a wild affair, meeting each other in secret as often as they could. The pair would sneak off, spending nights together in hotels, meeting in cars, and finding opportunities to be together whenever they could. In high school, Lisa had focused so much on being the best, she hardly had given any time to being a teenager. She never snuck out to meet with a boyfriend or misbehaved, and according to her own testimony, being with William made her feel as if she was a teen again. Despite the fact that Lisa was already married, she would go on to state in her emails to William that she had never felt anything like what she had felt for him before. She claimed he lit a fire in her, brought out the most sexual side of her, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was in love. William parroted the sentiment, telling her that she had brought him back to life after years of marriage, and that they were truly perfect for each other. In statements given after the fact, William would declare that he had grown accustomed to his life, and though he loved his wife and kids, Lisa was something new. She would do the things that his wife wouldn't. She would say yes to everything and do so with a smile, and that, he claimed, was just what he needed at the time. The affair continued for months on end, seeing each other whenever they could. His wife immediately sensed something was wrong, and though William denied that anything was happening, she would eventually stumble across emails between Lisa and her husband. In some of the emails, he claimed to have fallen out of love with her, something he had failed to mention when they talked, and she was heartbroken. She confronted him about the emails, and in response, he said he was sorry that she had seen them, but not sorry that he had cheated. The exchange, she would say, was incredibly cold and callous, and he barely seemed to care that he had hurt her. She filed for divorce immediately, telling William he needed to leave the home as she wasn't going to uproot their children's lives because of his stupidity. After moving out, he began to rent a small apartment in the area and gave Lisa a key of her own. Despite having a large home that she shared with her husband and kids, Lisa collected a small amount of her personal belongings and filled the apartment with them, often making up excuses to go out of the house for days on end. Bill's neighbors would state that Lisa was incredibly kind to them and introduced herself as Bill's live-in girlfriend and future spouse. She had met Bill's parents and would write to his mother often, telling her that she loved him beyond anyone else she had ever known. In one letter she wrote, "Bill is absolutely the best person I've ever known, and I love him more than I knew possible. However, one thing stood in the way of them being together: her marriage." When William's marriage dissolved in 2004, he was of the belief that Lisa would follow suit. She had stated multiple times that he had brought her back to life, that she woke up every day wanting to see him, desperate to be in his arms, and yet she continued to put off separating from Richard. By Richard's own account, he believed their marriage was happy. She never seemed dissatisfied, and she never brought up any issues she wanted him to work on, which he believed she would have if there were issues. Oftentimes, her mind would stay at work while with the family, but that was simply because her job was incredibly demanding, or so he thought. In his mind, his life was normal and content. Every week, she would sit next to him in church with their 2 daughters, watching their son altar serve, and he believed that her having an affair was an impossibility. He would describe his wife as the ultimate mother and partner, unaware of the years-long year-long affair she was carrying on. But similar to how William hadn't wanted to leave his wife, Lisa liked her life with Richard. Richard was accommodating to her needs, and whenever she would have to travel, he would take on the brunt of the parenting without complaint. Leaving him, especially for another man, might lead to a contentious divorce, bitter feelings, and an upheaval of their home life with their children caught in the middle, which is something she wanted to avoid at all cost. It was also vitally important that she continue to look professional to her peers, and dating a coworker immediately after divorcing her husband would be a bad look in her eyes. She wanted to avoid any speculation or assumed impropriety as long as she could help it. Instead, she would placate her lover, telling him that she did love him and she did want to be with only him. But she couldn't leave her husband just yet. She had a family, people who relied on her, and she wasn't ready to take the next step. As the years went on, Bill began to feel as if he really were the second choice, that Lisa would always choose her family over him, despite telling him otherwise. Being with Lisa at first was fun. She was a fun break from the monotony of work and family life, and they seemed to be two sides of the same coin, but he wanted someone who was going to pick him first and foremost, and that wasn't Lisa. Bill began to pull away from his longtime girlfriend. It just so happened that his pulling away coincided with an upcoming mission, and so when he started to grow distant from his paramour, she thought little of it. He was as singularly focused as she was, putting off work for nearly everything else. It would only make sense that he wouldn't be as available to her because of it. When he was out and about, she would go over to his apartment, which she believed that they shared, and leave little notes and messages for him to find later. She thought these notes would brighten his day and ease his stress, but Bill continued to ignore Lisa, and she began to believe he was going out of his way to avoid her. They had been best friends before, and did virtually everything together. They would go to the gym together most days, and purposely pick training missions to go on together. But now she could hardly get him to answer her calls. As distance began to grow between the two, the more desperately she seemed to want him. She would call him multiple times a day, but he had begun to leave her messages unanswered. She would send emails, declaring her love for him, but still he wouldn't respond. Messages with provocative, sexual titles were deleted and ignored, but Lisa couldn't figure out why. The almost fanatical need for him that seemed to grow from his dismissal eventually led to the one thing she had spent years carefully avoiding: her marriage ending. By January 2007, 3 years after the start of her affair with Bill, she would separate from her husband of 19 years. According to a statement Richard would give publicly, their relationship ending had been amicable and not done because of any infidelity, but that seemed to be too little too late. Bill had already moved on and begun a relationship with Colleen Shipman, a U.S. Air Force captain who worked as an engineer at Patrick Air Force Base in Florida. Bill had told Colleen about his relationship with Lisa after accidentally calling her Lisa while having sex. Scandalous, and told her how, for the past 4 years, he had engaged in an affair while still being married, with a woman who was married, and how he wanted a fresh start. The excitement that came from sneaking around had long departed, leaving him anxious and unhappy with how his life had turned out. Colleen liked Bill, and though his statements could be seen as red flags, told him she wanted to pursue a relationship with him as well, but only if he were to officially break things off with Lisa, who was still calling him every day. That meant giving back all the things she had left at his apartment, which had grown from some personal belongings to furniture and the bike she was using to train for an upcoming charity event. Colleen wanted Lisa out of Bill's life, just as a show of how serious he was about her, and Bill agreed. He had originally planned on letting the relationship fizzle out over time, hoping that Lisa would understand the relationship was over when he stopped returning her calls. But Lisa didn't seem to pick up his hints, instead calling him more in a bid for his attention. Wanting to pursue Colleen, Bill would meet up with Lisa and break up with her, adding that he hoped that they could be professional with each other at work and remain friends. According to Bill, Lisa took the breakup incredibly well, even better than he expected her to take it. She didn't seem hurt or upset, and even laughed at the notion of being angry with him. She told Bill that she would always see him as a good friend, and that she still wanted to keep him in her life, no matter how that looked. However, despite what she told him, she was more than just angry. She was incensed. Her marriage with her husband had just ended, and she finally done what he always wanted her to do, and now he wanted to be with someone else? She felt as if the rug had been pulled out from under her, and that she had just found out Bill had been cheating on her the entire relationship, despite the fact that she had originally been the other woman. She became obsessed with Colleen Shipman, the woman who she believed stole the man of her dreams away from her. She found out that Bill was seeing her through hacking his emails. She still had a key to his apartment and would often go over when he was out. In her free time, she would follow Colleen to see what made her so special, and why she was the one that Bill chose. She continued to call Bill every day, although she claimed that was just friendly, not romantic. They had agreed to be friends in the breakup, and friends talked, so why couldn't they? Bill would hardly ever respond, and when he did, he kept the conversation short. He was more focused on keeping things professional and pleasant, so should they see each other in person, no one would be able to tell that they'd ever been together, and it seemed to him that she wanted the same thing. She would tell Bill that she was moving on with her life, that she had so many things going on at work, and with her divorce, she barely had time to think about romance. Bill would tell her that Colleen felt as if she wasn't moving on, and that she was sick of her calling all the time, but Lisa would tell him that she was just paranoid. Colleen simply didn't understand their relationship, and maybe her being so jealous of Lisa was a sign that she wasn't the right girl for him. Lisa continued to hack Bill's computer, both at work and at his apartment. She would print out and read Bill's emails to Colleen, which were full of declarations of love and sexual messages, discussing how much they enjoyed each other more than anyone else they had ever been with. This angered Lisa beyond belief, but she was a smart woman. She had worked hard to achieve everything she had set her mind to, and she decided to set her mind on getting Bill back, and there was only one thing standing in her way: Colleen. Lisa became convinced that if she could remove Colleen from the picture, Bill would come back to her as if nothing had happened, and in her mind, the only surefire way to remove Colleen from Bill's life was to end her life. Lisa began to obsess more about the couple, and come up with what she believed to be a foolproof plan to murder Colleen. In some emails between Bill and Colleen, they discussed how she would be traveling soon, stopping at the Orlando International Airport. Given that the airport was hundreds of miles away from where Lisa resided in Houston, Texas, she believed that should Colleen go missing there, she could easily escape any suspicion. Besides, people go missing from airports all the time, and if she planned the attack just right, it would be a long time before people knew Colleen was gone. What she planned on doing to Colleen after she got into her car was anyone's guess, but she made sure to pack latex gloves, a wig, a pistol, and ammunition, plus pepper spray, a hooded trench coat, a drilling hammer, black leather gloves, an 8-inch knife, the emails between Bill and Colleen, because I mean at this point why not do that to yourself, and MapQuest directions from her home to the airport with her. It was also reported by police that in order to avoid leaving a paper trail by stopping at gas stations, Lisa brought gallons of gasoline with her and wore adult diapers. However, Lisa would refute this claim outright because she absolutely did plan to kidnap and assault Colleen, but she drew the line at potentially shitting herself. On February 4th, 2007, Lisa left her home in Houston, Texas, and drove 900 miles to the Orlando International Airport. She arrived the next day around 12 a.m. and got dressed. She put on her black bob wig, a hat, a scarf, and a brown trench coat, hoping she would blend in with the crowd. However, her strange appearance only drew more attention to her. Lisa then waited a half hour for Colleen's plane to touch down. She had planned everything to the T. However, her plan did not allow for the airport to lose Colleen's luggage. As Colleen waited for her bag to appear at baggage claim, Lisa kept her distance, choosing to stand between 4 to 6 feet behind her. Colleen took notice of the strange woman immediately and thought she was suspicious. She hadn't been on her flight, and as it was 1 a.m., there was hardly anyone else in the airport. But, not wanting to be impolite, she pretended not to notice her. After all the bags had been taken off the carousel, Colleen realized her bag was missing and went to talk to the baggage claim office. They informed her that her bag would be there in the next 2 hours, as it had been put on the next flight over. She was given a $12 voucher to make up for the wait. Annoyed, Colleen went to the food court area, all the while being followed by Lisa. Lisa seemed to be shadowing Colleen, making sure to keep her distance, but never blending in with her surroundings. She would go on to claim that at the time, she believed that she had been doing an amazing job avoiding suspicion, but in fact, multiple people had taken notice of her and her strange appearance, and how she seemed to be following Colleen. After leaving the baggage claim office, Colleen became convinced that she was being followed by the wigged woman. She hadn't been on her flight, but every time she turned around, there she was, staring at her in her hat and her trench coat. Finally, at 3 a.m., her bag arrived and she was able to leave the airport, but when she turned around, the woman in the wig was still following her. She tried to remain calm, hoping that she was being paranoid. There had to be a perfectly reasonable explanation as to why the woman was there. This woman wasn't following her. She just so happened to be going through the exact same issue that she was. Everything would be fine. Colleen went on an airport shuttle meant to take her to the lot she had parked her car in, and for a moment was relieved, as it appeared that the woman was not following her. However, a moment later, there she was, slightly out of breath as if she had to run to catch the bus. When she got off at the blue satellite parking area and began to make her way to row 33, where she had parked, she felt slightly relieved, believing that the other woman had stayed on the shuttle and she just made a mountain out of a molehill. But then, she heard the slap of footsteps behind her, and she knew she was still being followed. She quickly made her way to her car, barreling in and locking herself inside without a second thought. But seconds later, Lisa began to pound on the car, demanding to be let in. Lisa yelled into the car that she needed help. Her boyfriend had said he wasn't coming to pick her up, and now she had no way home. She asked for a ride and began to cry while hitting Colleen's window, hoping the woman would pity her and let her in. Colleen felt bad for the weird woman outside of the car, but knew that something about this wasn't right. She told Lisa no, and told her that she should go to a parking attendant if she needed help, and then started her car. Lisa continued to hit the car window and asked if she could use Colleen's cell phone. Still, Colleen said no. Lisa was sobbing at that point and asked Colleen to roll down her window because she couldn't hear her. She begged her to roll her window down over and over again until finally, feeling bad for the woman, Colleen did. However, the moment the window began to open, Lisa dropped the act. She stopped crying, pulled out a canister of pepper spray, and sprayed Colleen directly in her eyes. Colleen immediately rolled the window back up and, despite the searing pain, kept her eyes open to back out of the parking spot. Everything was on fire, but she knew she had to get away from the woman who had just attacked her. She drove until she found someone to help her, who immediately called the police. Within minutes, police were at the parking lot, and Colleen was being treated. Despite Lisa's objective brilliance, the entire plan had gone up in flames, to the point where she had not only been captured on camera multiple times, but she had isolated herself in a satellite parking lot with the police and Colleen. Within minutes, the police found Lisa, who was throwing her duffel bag into the trash at the shuttle bus stop. She was immediately arrested and brought to where Colleen was being cared for by medics. Colleen took one look at Lisa, now without her wig or trench coat, and identified her as the woman who had pepper sprayed her. The police had taken her duffel bag out of the garbage, and they asked her if there were any weapons inside. Lisa feigned horror, stating that there was nothing of that sort in her bag, and claimed that she hadn't been the one to pepper spray Colleen. She encouraged the police to look, seemingly hoping that her denial would be enough to sway them. However, when they opened the bag, they found the trench coat she had been wearing, a 2-pound drilling hammer, a black buck knife, several feet of rubber tubing, a receipt for a room at a hotel nearby, computer memory sticks, and a floppy disk which included drawings of women in distress. In the same trash bin, they found the black wig she had been wearing, alongside the BB gun she had brought. Her car was searched, and the police had found 2 soiled diapers and a letter professing her love for Bill. But even more disturbingly, they found what they would later identify as a murder and dismemberment kit. Immediately, she was arrested and taken into booking, and overnight, she would become somewhat of a celebrity. While in police custody, Lisa would tell everyone she saw that would listen to her that she wasn't normally like this. She was Lisa Nowak, one of the most accomplished women in the space program. She worked tirelessly throughout her career, been at the top of her classes, and always accomplished what she had set out to do. She wasn't supposed to be taken to jail over a failed murder plot. That wasn't the type of person she was, and yet there she was at 4 a.m. in jail. Lisa would go on to speak to the detectives put in charge of the case, and state that this entire ordeal had been a big misunderstanding. She explained that she was involved with Bill, and though she conceded their relationship was, quote, more of a working relationship, less than a romantic relationship, unquote, she needed to speak to the other woman who he was seeing, that being Colleen. She felt as if it was her womanly duty to talk to Colleen and let her know the kind of person Bill was. She wanted to explain to Colleen that Bill and her had been in a relationship for years at that point, and that she was always going to be in his life. She found out that Colleen would be flying from Houston, where she was, to Orlando, and casually chose to drive 900 miles to meet her. She only brought the pepper spray, BB gun, and drilling hammer to, quote, entice Colleen into talking to her, but she was never going to do anything to actually hurt her, even though she did at the first chance she got. The sheer strangeness of the case immediately made its way to the news, and the story took on a life of its own. The story was insane on its own, but the fact that the 2 people involved were astronauts made it even more interesting. Astronauts had always been lauded as heroes, and the best of the best that humanity had to offer, so the very idea that 2 astronauts to be engaged in a messy, years-long affair and would-be murder plot was too enticing to pass up. In court, Lisa would plead not guilty, citing again that she never meant to hurt anyone and just wanted to talk to Colleen. Her lawyers advocated for her to be let out on bond, and cited her history of being a hardworking wife and mother. The defense rebutted this, pointing to the obvious evidence that she had planned to kill her romantic rival over the course of of weeks. Eventually, the courts would grant $15,000 bail for Lisa, but with the added measure that she be fitted with a GPS monitor to make sure she wasn't near Colleen. In court, Lisa and her lawyers would fight that this ankle bracelet was inhumane punishment, as sometimes it emitted a loud screech and it made it harder for her to work out, and for some reason, the judge found that argument to be compelling and allowed the ankle monitor to be removed. As the trial got closer, it became clear that Lisa was planning on pleading not guilty due to reason of insanity. Her lawyers had her evaluated by 2 separate psychiatrists who found that Lisa had been living with an undiagnosed obsessive-compulsive personality disorder and autism her entire life. They also clarified that when Lisa had carried out the would-be attack, she was dealing with a singular episode of major depressive disorder, which led to a brief psychotic disorder, all caused by the loss of her relationship with Bill. Even with the evaluations, the prosecution had a nearly airtight case, but it would be at least 2 years until it went to trial, at which point Lisa took a deal. Instead of pleading not guilty to attempted murder, kidnapping and assault, she instead pled not guilty to felony burglary and misdemeanor battery. She was sentenced to a year's probation, which is, quite frankly, a slap on the wrist for a would-be murderer. Following the attempt on her life caused by her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, Colleen would get married to Bill and move to Alaska. According to People magazine, the pair run the website adventurewrite.com, which provides literary management, education services, and Irish dancing. Lisa reportedly lives in Houston, Texas, and lives a relatively quiet life. And strangely enough, that's pretty much it. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like or a comment. If there's another case you would like to see, email me at dreading.official@gmail.com. With all of that said, have a great day, and remember to stay safe.